I am really excited to have Brian here to present to us right now. And also for anybody who couldn't make it, we will of course be sharing with this with you in the member portal. Brian is a serial entrepreneur and author. He's always taken the road less traveled. And at 19 years old, he pioneered the industry of professional junk with 1-800-GOT-JUNK, turning a chore that people avoid into an exceptional customer service experience. He then scaled the success into two more home service brands, Wow One Day Painting and Shack Shine under the OTE Brands banner. Brian learned the ins and outs of business by running his own, and he believes that anyone with a fire in their gut and a vision for doing something incredible can do the same. His philosophy, WTF, or willing to fail, stems from his belief of the power of dreaming big, taking risks, and learning from mistakes. Through franchising, he's giving thousands of aspiring entrepreneurs the chance to BYOB, which is build your own business and be your own boss and live their dream of business ownership. Find Brian's two books, WTF, Willing to Fail, and also BYOB, Build Your Own Business, on brianscudamore.com or Amazon, or I'm sure anywhere you find books. So, Brian, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Before we drop in, you've got a group of COOs right now from mostly North America. We've got a few that are in from different parts of Europe. We've got a couple that are in from Latin America. Anything that you want to kind of drop in before we just go into a chat side on anything you've been thinking? Sure.
Yeah, no, I just think it's the importance of, what Eric Church and I would call, who's our COO and president. You can exchange those titles, one for one. I think they're very similar, but it's the importance of relationship, the importance of the two in the box mentality. I have not met a CEO that's good at being both a CEO and a COO, and I have not met a COO that's good at being both as well. And I think the model that's worked for me and seen it work for many others is two in the box. Two heads are better than one, but it's how those heads sort of show up together. Eric and I have never in 14 years had an argument. We've certainly had plenty of disagreements, but the way we show up together with care for each other and care for each other's opinions and ideas, it's not about being right, but it's about making the business stronger. And it's an incredibly powerful relationship to have. It's one that Cameron and I had, and we've obviously still got a great friendship today, but it's one of those things where I believe you have to get it right. And I believe most companies get it wrong. So I think there's massive opportunity in figuring out. I'm not saying we have all the answers, but the two in the box model has been nothing short of rocket fuel for us.
Awesome. And now, Brian, you and I have done a lot of speaking over the years to groups of entrepreneurs in so many different cities and countries. And now we're speaking to the kind of the Erics and the Camerons. We're speaking to the COO group. So you know us probably better than anybody because you've worked with four different COOs over the years. You had me with you for 6.5 years. You had Lori Baggio as kind of an interim COO. You had Lonnie Skinner, who came in as former president of Starbucks. And then you've had Eric Church, who's been there for like 14 years, which is like crazy. Can you speak to the differences of working with these different styles of COOs and what you learned along the way and how you've had to adapt as a leader? And then also maybe speak to the different season that the company was in and what made, the different relative strengths of COOs good for different seasons.
Yeah. So, if I start with my first, right, that was you and I, Cameron, and Cameron was 2 million to 106 million is what we did together in 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And I think there was a magic in our relationship, our friendship, our trust, our belief in possibility. A weakness of ours, though, and I think it was the right thing at the time, and it was the cycle of the business. I wrote a chapter in WTF called Nitro and Glycerin. And so, those two things are fairly inert when they're separate, and you put them together, Brian and Cameron, things can get kind of explosive. And it wasn't that we argued or had explosive personalities, but we were both very fire ready, aim, ADD types at the time. Young, inexperienced relative to what we were building, Neither of us had built something to the $100 million level before, and we were building the rocket ship while we were flying it. So it was awesome, and it was the right thing at the right time. But then it got to a point where we were making decisions together that were somewhat dangerous. Hey, let's prove out this model that adding more trucks makes more sense, and the more the merrier. And let's just go buy 16 trucks and put them all in Vancouver overnight. You know, we were starting to do some things that seemed bold and seemed to be the right decisions, but they were getting expensive and they didn't necessarily work. If I look at Eric as a contrast, you know, Cameron and I are both like the Converse wearing, or maybe Cameron's got desert boots on right now, who knows, you know, a little bit more relaxed, laid back, fly by the seat of our pants at times. Eric would be the very Toronto, you know, you often see him in a blazer with a pocket square and, you know, a lot more buttoned up figuratively and literally, and a true professional. But the business needed that balance, that two in the box of Brian's the visionary, Eric's the executor. I don't like to hire. I don't like to train. I don't like to develop people. I would if I was good at it, but I'm not good at it. So I get out of the way and he does it. And so I think that it's, like Cameron said, sort of a seasonality to the right COO and CEO combination at the right time. If I look at Lonnie, very, very smart. She's gone on to do much bigger things than she did here. But the challenge there was, I don't think she believed in the craziness of an entrepreneur. She used to work with Howard Schultz and thought the guy was a little nuts. And, you know, if you could ask her frankly, she'd probably say I was a little nuts, and I probably am, but that's okay. It's seeing the value in each other. So one of the biggest strengths in Eric and I, we've always got each other's backs. We've never let each other down. We're always, you know, we might debate in a closed room, but then come out completely aligned. You know, those of you that have kids, it's the mom and dad symptom, you know, or syndrome. It's, you know, my youngest, my 12-year-old will come up and go, Mom said it was okay if I do such and such. Is that cool with you? And I'm like, did Mom really say it was okay? You know, you've got to come out completely aligned, mom and dad, so to speak, in your messaging, in your vision, how to get there. And that's been incredibly important. So hugely, obviously a huge fan of the relationship of a CEO and a COO. And if it's not the right fit, like it wasn't with Lonnie, the sooner I put an end to it, the better for everybody, including her. But it's always been finding that absolute right, perfect person. And perfect doesn't mean, people often say, well, where did you find Eric? And I sort of take that question in my mind, and the sort of dialogue is, why does it matter where I found him? Why does it matter what he did before? What matters is that I found the right person for me. Because I think other people go, I want an Eric. So they think if they look in the same places and understand the answer to that question, but it's about me understanding myself and what I needed, where I was weak, where I needed someone to sort of pull up the slack, and finding that absolute perfect fit was paramount.
Brian, I'm curious with, you know, this is probably from a COO's perspective. We all have to let go of key leaders and key individuals in an organization, and it can cause massive ripple effects, but it's always the right thing to do, especially in hindsight. So, you know, 6.5 years in, you let me go. A year in with Lonnie, you let Lonnie go. You've had other key executives that have worked within Wennington or Got Junk over the last, he's been building this for 35 years. 35 years. For 30, I'm just having like a bit of a flashback. Call it like when it's really been the big professional company for 20 years, certainly. You've had to let key executives go. Any lessons in doing those kind of letting key executives go, and how you work through that transition time instead of holding on to them for too long because you're scared?
Yeah, I mean, I still think, you know, we've got a heart, and as leaders, we here in this business, we've certainly held on to some people too long. We had a leader for Wow One Day Painting that we exited recently. and it should have probably happened a year and a half earlier during the 3.5 year tenure. And sometimes you just want it to really work, and you try and you hope and pray, and it doesn't work. And when you know, and you hold everyone back, the business and so on, by not finding the right fit sooner. And so I think, I mean, tell me a business that hasn't grown incredibly successful without making lots of leadership changes along the way. We can pick any big tech brand, we can pick Southwest Airlines, we can pick Starbucks, you name it. I mean, Howard Schultz left and came back 3 times because some changes didn't work out. And it happens. But I think it's racing to that conflict and facing that head on is more important than sort of hoping it's going to fix itself.
What do you think has made it work? Eric was actually one of our speakers at our last in-person event. We held it in Vancouver, and he came and spoke to us back in April. So anybody that was there got to see him speak for an hour. What do you think it is about Eric that has made him successful and able to stay in a company for 13 years as it's gone from about 100 million to 600 plus million? Has he had to evolve as a leader, or was he just kind of the right size? Like, how has he had to grow?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think it's a lot like a marriage in that anyone in one and who has been in one either now or at some point and it was successful, did you have to continue to grow together? I think the answer is usually yes. I look at my marriage and, we've stretched and grown and challenged each other. And I think Eric and I do the same thing. Eric's running a $700 million business today. When he came in and we were just shy of 100 million because sales had fallen during the financial meltdown of 08, he couldn't have run a $700 million business then. So he had to learn and grow, and we had to push each other. One thing about Eric that's really special, and there's obviously a lot of special things, but I have never seen anybody ask for more feedback from the people around them, from his team, and work with a coach for 14 years, week in, week out, in getting better. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And I think that's a real strength of his. So will he be the right leader at $1 billion? Yes. Will he be the right leader at $1.5 billion and $2 billion? I believe so, because I think that the way he tackles it and looks at opportunities is the right way. I think the bigger question is, will I be the leader, at 2 billion? I hope I will be, and we're building great momentum and things start to accelerate, but both of us have to be able to keep up with each other, which is incredibly important.
Cool. How did you and Eric, or how did you and your COOs, we'll just stay with you and Eric. How did you and Eric stay on the same page? What systems do you have in place to ensure that he's aligned with you with built, vision and strategy, or whatever your current roles are? And then how do you stay in sync with him?
Yeah, just frequent discussions. So we're always in contact. We would talk at least once a week for a good length of time, an hour or two. Just to check in with each other, how we're doing, what we're working on, how it's going. It really is making sure we've both got the right focus. Where do either one of us need help? Where are we challenged? But frequent conversation to ensure to have alignment. And Eric, as a COO, who's more executional than I am, is really great at leading that with me. Hey, I just want to check in, Brian, and make sure we're aligned on this before we go into an exec meeting tomorrow. Great. And if we're not aligned, we talk about it and we get aligned. So we had a business, a moving company called You Move Me, and we had it for 8 years. And he wanted to shut it down for about a year, and I didn't want to shut it down. Well, what do you do when people disagree? Well, I brought it to my forum group in the entrepreneur organization, and someone reminded me that we use the rocket fuel methodology, 2 in a box, and we follow pretty similarly to how they do things in the book. And someone said, Ty goes to the implementer. Well, Eric's the implementer. And I thought about it and I said, well, why does Ty go to the implementer? And someone said, well, Brian, it's because they've got to execute. So they've got to have buy-in that the direction is the right one because they're executing on that direction. So I went back to Eric and I said, how do you feel about you moving? He goes, I really want to shut it down. And I said, okay, let's do it. Tie goes to the implementer. And he appreciated that trust. And man, was it ever the right decision. And I was more emotionally connected to something that needed to go. It was the wrong business for us, and long story, but it didn't fit our happy brands and we needed to let it go. And today someone else has it and they're wanting to let it go.
I'll bet. Can you talk about how I heard you tell one time over dinner when Lonnie came into 1-800-GOT-JUNK, you were so relieved because it had been about a year that you were so relieved to have someone there to run the business as COO for you that you kind of abdicated and walked away from the business in some ways. I don't know if I'm paraphrasing or if I made up my facts on my own, but if from what I recollect, or I think I recollected, it seemed like that happened. Can you talk about how the CEO can let go of the business a little bit, but how they can also keep their hand in the can, how they can also, inspect what they expect, how they can, do you do skip level meetings? How do you stay involved, but not, overly involved or.
Yeah, I think my challenge then was I got a little passive with the relationship. So I put too much trust in her, in Lonnie, too soon. And it didn't help either of us in the long run. It took about 5 months before I realized something was really wrong. And so she needed me, in hindsight, she needed me to be closer to her with some decisions and say, well, what do you think, Lonnie? Well, what do you think, Brian? And let's talk about that and really make sure we made the right decisions together versus me just giving her all decision-making ability. So if I contrast when Eric came in, I said, listen, we can't get this wrong. And so we agreed that every flight we'd take, every business meeting we'd go to, we'd travel together. And that would just be time for us to chat, get to know each other, chat about the business, and ensure we were aligned. And so I stayed really close, not micromanaging, but just close and connected to Eric for a year before I then got out of the way and said, okay, I trust you, you got this. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going anywhere, but it just means that we don't have to, chat constantly, but we can, chat frequently enough that it still supports both of our goals and our own roles.
I remember it's crazy that it was 18 years ago that we did our Toronto road trip where we were sharing a hotel room. I remember coming back in my night out partying with Belinda Stronach and sharing a room. Can you speak to the fact that CEOs and COOs are kind of like men are from Mars, women are from Venus? Like, men are not hairy versions of women. We see the world differently. We perceive the things differently. I think CEOs and COOs tend to see the world and business and people and things differently. How do you speak COO and how do you get Eric to speak CEO? Like, have you guys learned to speak each other's language, or has it just been pretty simple?
I think it's just being aware of each other's gifts and talents, strengths, opportunities. So something, and I don't know if you remember this about me, but Eric was telling someone the other day, and I overheard him telling this story, and I forgot that he's like, Brian will look at a presentation or look at a spreadsheet and immediately notice something that doesn't add up, like immediately. He's like, what's wrong with this? And I can't explain why, but I can see patterns. And finance or whoever was presenting is like, oh, you're right, there's an error there. And so I will find things technically in the business in terms of missing systems and things, and they start to call it the Scudamore effect. It's like, well, it's because Brian tested it. No, it's always been there. I just happened to be the first one to notice it. And so Eric recognizes that keen sort of extra sense in me, but I also recognize things in him, and we've just learned to work with that and trust that.
Love that.
Yeah, and Eric will say, vice versa, both of us, Brian really thinks this is important. He can't necessarily translate for everybody or articulate why. And Eric will ask questions and then go, okay, I think I got this, and he'll translate. So his role often is a translator. as you remember, Cameron, I see visions and ideas in my head before they've happened. I'm like, we're going to get on Oprah. We're going to get on Ellen. I can see it. Even if people don't believe, how we're going to do that might be a little bit fuzzy, but I need someone else to believe along with me to then help translate to others why it might be important. And Eric does a phenomenal job of that.
Love that. By the way, we didn't have in your bio that you are now on Dragon's Den, which is the Shark Tank in the US, Dragon's Den in Canada. So congrats on making another one of your visions come true, because you talked about that probably 15 years ago. I know you, or maybe longer, you mentioned it. So congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you. I tried out 3 times. Third time's a charm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, last question that I want to talk through, and then I want to be able to answer some questions from the group. So if any of our members do have questions, throw your hands up in Zoom and we'll go and take your questions in order. You guys can ask your questions of Brian. I guess the last one is in terms of your focus and the COO's focus. Do you find yourself ever trying to pull the COO out of any areas of the business at all? Do you ever find that they get too involved in certain areas of the business that you want them to be, less involved in, and that you have to kind of pull them back out?
Yeah, I mean, let's use Eric. I think what I've seen in Eric, I saw this in you too, Cameron, is that, Eric loves working, right? I think we all do to a certain degree, and different times in our life, it's been more intense. But there's times where it's just like, I would go up to Cameron, I'm like, dude, just slow down. You are talking so fast right now. You have no idea. You sound like you're on drugs, but you're not. It's like, just take a breather. And it's like, sometimes the 2 in the box model can complement each other, where Eric, I mean, we joke that he plugs in and recharges at night like an iPhone. Like it's unbelievable. I don't know where he gets his energy. You've never seen the guy yawn. Like, it's nuts. And so sometimes it's helping to pull him out and going, okay, hold on, you got like 14 reports right now. And look at all the priorities and this and that. Like, where do we need to spend more time talking about what to take off your plate? Eric doesn't want to let anyone down, first and foremost himself. And so it's that ability just to sometimes go, okay, is this really working for everybody? You care about your people, you care about their health, you don't want them to burn out. And it's important to stay on top of it and have those conversations.
That's great. Yeah, he looks the best he's looked since college too. I think he's quit drinking and he's like taking care of himself again. So maybe he's like somehow getting that recharge going.
Crazy.
Mike Sanfiorenzo, you've got a first question.
Hey, Brian, thanks for joining today. So along with making changes at the COO role, looking back at all the business that you scaled, what do you think were some other really big key changes that you made that allowed you to hop over each growth wall as you hit it? Would just love to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, it really is as simple as it's all about people. It's finding the right people and treating them right. And if we have not had the right person in any seat in the company, things fall apart. So Lonnie was a good example of the ex-Starbucks woman. Again, great woman, just the wrong position for her and for me at the time, and my lack of leadership with her. There were lots of reasons why, but one person in a $100 million-ish company, she and I just about killed and bankrupted the business. So what one person can do, it isn't just the person at the top. It can be people in other roles within the business. So we try and really sit down as a team regularly and assess our talent. We had a CFO, Cameron might remember this, but we had a CFO. She was probably the best in the city at doing her job. She was not the best cultural fit within the company. And we're a culture first company, and it didn't work for us. And so getting someone out of a role who does an incredible job, I mean, super impressive, but isn't the right cultural fit, you have to make those tough choices. And, I've always said the right thing is seldom the easy thing. Was the Cameron Brian, sort of split up the right thing for both of us? Hell yeah. Was it the right thing? Was it the easy thing? No, far from it. I mean, I remember that day very well, as Cameron would, and not easy, but we knew and believed going forward that it was the best thing for both of us, that would lead us both to better places for each other in the business. So making those tough decisions anywhere in the business, and remembering that it isn't just about the business, it's also about that person. And they might not see it coming, but they might need a good push.
And yeah, great point. By the way, if you ever order an eggs Benedict at breakfast and your CEO orders the grapefruit, it's over. Trust me, like from experience, I'm like, Brian never ordered a grapefruit in his fucking life. He ordered a grapefruit. I was like, what the fuck is happening here? That was great.
I do not
Taylor.
remember that.
Oh, yeah, I do. It was horrible. Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, Brian, you talked about getting the CEO and the CEO on the same page prior to exec meetings, but issues will come up, whether addressed by, raised by one of them or somebody else in the exec team, where the CEO and the COO have different positions. And sometimes the CEO, like yourself, like wants to charge ahead, and the COO says, well, here are the consideration. How do you make it so the rest of the exec team doesn't think that one of them is always stepping on the other's toes? Like, should the CEO always take the lead and say, go offline with this discussion? Or does the CEO have the responsibility to step in every now and then and say, hey, why don't we talk about this separately? We'll deal with it in the next exec session.
Yeah, good question, Taylor. So the way our executive team meetings work, it's Eric's team. I'm there as a participant. So if we disagree, Eric will stick handle, and he'll be like, you know what? Brian and I should spend a little more time asking each other some questions to ensure we're 100% aligned. Let's do that later, and we'll come back to you. So we're never seen as fighting, because we're not. It might just be seen as there's a perception here or an opportunity, and we need to spend more time. And so Cameron and I used to talk about this a lot, the seek first to understand versus be understood. So to get aligned, Eric and I just sit down and go, you know, what's the best thing for the business here, and why? Why do you feel that this is the best direction? Why do I feel this? And we're not trying to prove ourselves. We're not trying to be right. We're trying to make the right decision, the best one for the business, and trying to put our ego aside. Easier said than done, but we do make it work.
I love that. Eric.
Thanks, Cameron. My question is, I'm an owner operator, and the BHAG at first was to get the company to an average of 30% profitability month over month, and then be able to take on new revenue growth and keep that profitability with the processes in place. So we've done that. We've been there for about a year now. So the question to myself is, at what point do I hire someone to take on my role and start something new? I don't know. I think you have several companies. Have you made that decision in the past of when to step out, because your skill set of getting something to that point, that's no longer required, and you could use that building something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the sooner you can get out of any role that someone else can do better is better. So I'm a big fan of the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And, you know, you take your hats that you have in the company, and let's say there's 6 major hats you're wearing at any given time. Let's say finance is one of them. Unless you're the rock star finance person and you think you can really do it better and it's needed, how do you get out of your own way by recruiting someone else to run that role? We did it in PR, and I think Cameron did a great job helping to convince me that someone could do PR better than us. You know, it was a gift of mine. It was something I loved doing. It was something I was really good at. And I remember, you know, Cameron hired Tyler to come in, and Tyler got us on Oprah. Brian didn't get us on Oprah. Brian set the vision and put it up on the wall. Brian reminded Tyler and Cameron over and over how important it was, but I didn't make it happen. Tyler called every day for months. I mean, Oprah knew who Tyler was, probably. Like, it was like, leave me alone, okay, get you on the show and get out of my way. But it was one of those things where the sooner I can get out of any hats that I wear, unless it's my number one thing that I bring to the company, which right now I think is vision and cheerleading of people. Jack Daly, the professional sales coach, if any of you know him or have dealt with him, you know, he told me that probably 30 years ago. You go, Brian, your role as CEO, the type of CEO you are, is vision and championing the culture. You shouldn't do anything else. And so I worked day by day by day to get everything else off my plate. I still do too much. And I do a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing. So it is a work in progress. It's a daily reminder of, okay, hold on here. Like, why this isn't adding value to my day or to anyone else's, and get out of the way. So if you're an owner operator, yeah, get out of your own way and figure out, if you figured out the model that's scalable, put someone in place now that can scale it under your leadership.
Appreciate
That was
that.
something
Thank you.
that Brian worked really hard with me on, was getting me to release things and to hire people to do stuff too, or to delegate more. And in retrospect, I look back and there's way too much that I was doing that I should have been delegating way faster, that I was grinding through, you know, the important work versus the critical few things. I was working on the important many.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, Lacey.
So we got to meet Eric a few weeks ago at the in-person event in Vancouver, and he had mentioned that he kind of like operates off of a 3-year rule with anybody, where at year 3, like you should be moving on to like a new role, like new responsibilities. And I'm interested to hear how you guys changed his responsibilities as second in command.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say he does it more for others than himself, but he's always been the top executor in the company, and I hope he will be forever. But he really dials up and changes his competencies and sort of filling gaps, either with different people to bring into place, or getting out of his own way, or upskilling himself. So he's somebody who's kind of coaching himself, if you will, while he's also coaching other people within the business, going, hey, I think we should move you to a new brand. I think, like James Alish, who runs 1-800-GOT-JUNK, has run Shack Shine, Wow and Day Painting, and has run You Move Me. And great experiences for him all around. So it really does work. But I'm not the one actively working with Eric to say, hey, it's been about 3 years, let's change up your role. He's doing it himself.
So like he basically finds the gap in the business and kind of molds himself to it.
Yeah, I mean, it might come up in discussion with him and I, but he's really the one that is understanding the directional change that needs to happen first, and he's pulling that trigger.
Very good. Thank you.
A
Thank
random
you.
memory for Brian. Brian, you were in the back of the Weston Bayshore getting ready to ride out on a camel, and I was in the back of the kitchen on a cell phone trying to recruit James Alish back in like 2007. He's been with you forever and a day. Why do you think people stay with you and a company that is so, growth? It's not normal for people to stay in companies, more than 5 years these days. Baby boomers maybe, but not Gen Y and Gen X. Why do you think you've had the ability to keep so many people for so long?
Yeah, I think we care, and I think we don't just say we care, but we show care. I can take James Alish as an example. He left for a few years. He had a son that was about to be born with a major health issue, and they had to go to Ronald McDonald House in Edmonton and live there. And, his son's okay today, but, it was one of those things where his priorities changed. And, we paid him to move and live in Edmonton and take the time. And we said, when you're ready, if you're ready, like it's just doing the right thing for your people and showing loyalty to them. They show loyalty to you, and it's a caring culture, and it's by no means perfect, but there's a lot of really good people here that just choose to stay because they wouldn't want to go anywhere else. Like there's 2 people walking in right now with babies. They've recently had babies, they're on mat leave, and I can see them just walking in to introduce the babies at work. And, it's just happening, right? And it's all these smiling faces for babies, but it's like, it's a culture that is special. And we preserve the culture by, you know, back to Mike's question on, we talked about people and getting rid of people at different levels. That culture needs to be preserved from the top to the bottom. And when you have someone who's great as a CFO, but they're not a good cultural fit, I don't know, my opinion is you need to make a change.
I agree. Peter.
Thanks, Cameron. So mine's a little bit of an odd one. So I became the COO of my company about three and a half years ago. And we've been able to grow almost 300% in that time. Partly because my founder's typical solopreneur, really, really good at coming up with an idea, building a company, and then kind of gets out over his skis and either gets bored and sells it, or it just kind of stagnates. He is a lot more cautious than I am. So I'm pushing really hard. We're bringing in other divisions of the company and we're growing. We're looking at another 50% growth year this year, even over last year. And he is sort of trying to put the brakes on things, not because he doesn't want to grow, but because he's not a pessimist, but he's very realistic, understands the downsides and the potential downsides of growing as fast as we have. How do I, as a COO, push to grow the company as fast as possible without, alienating what he sees for the company or taking those concerns into consideration? He did give me equity in the company over the last few years, so that's another factor. It's a little bit different, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, thoughts that come to mind are, I would sit down and have a conversation and say, what are you feeling? It sounds to me like he's probably scared. Why is he scared? What's he afraid of? What's the worst case scenario? And maybe, from your perspective, it's like, well, that worst case scenario could never happen, and here's why. And look at the flip side of, if we don't grow, a competitor's going to come in, this is going to happen. Like, I think it's just balancing what you both want for the business by talking about it, getting on the same page and agreeing on a direction, whatever that is. Because if you've got, a CEO and a COO will always have tension that kind of pull in different directions, and that's inefficient. You've got to figure out how to go in the same direction and march in lockstep. And, Lonnie and I, it was like, we weren't fighting, but I learned the direction she was trying to go faster and harder into a different direction than where I believed. And then you're wasting time worrying about what the other person's doing versus working together. So I think, Peter, it's sitting down and having some conversations with your co-founder and founder and just get aligned, understand the emotion behind it all.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And he is, he's not opposed to growth. He just, it seems like every time I set stuff up, we created new divisions in the company that has really been profitable and beneficial. His just knee jerk, just from being a solopreneur, he's opened and successfully ran probably 15 companies in his lifetime. He just always looks for the immediate negative, right? So,
and fear serves us all well, right? Prevents us from getting hurt. And sometimes you need a friendly push from a friend to say, no, I got your back. Like, we're going to be good. Let's try this. But it's understanding what's behind the fear, coming up with a plan.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Peter, thank you. Thanks, Brian. Last question, Misty.
Hey, so you spoke a little bit about the seasonality of the relationship between the CEO and COO, and you also spoke about how you feel that Eric is the right leader for growing the company quite a bit down the road. And then you said you're not sure if you're the right leader for growing the company a long way down the road. Can you tell me a little bit about if Eric didn't feel that way, what you would expect to see from him to help get you guys on the same page?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, my point in that comment was, I'm so clear and confident in Eric's ability to keep up with the pace of change. I'm more confident in his ability sometimes than mine, but, I guess we all have insecurities at times. So I just came back from Dragon's Den filming for 2 weeks, 100 hours worth of filming for an ADD guy staring at people and listening and writing notes and asking questions and 14 cameras. And I mean, it was overwhelming. I came back just so exhausted. But going into that, my self-talk was, can I do this? Like, am I actually going to be okay and get through 100 hours of filming? And wasn't sure I could do it. So I think it's that same thing where I go, I think in 5 years, I'll be able to keep up and grow and have this sustained energy and all that sort of stuff. But Eric is more predictable than I. And I just have more confidence in him than I do myself sometimes. So we'll both be okay. And I know he would be my biggest cheerleader to say, of course you can do this. You're made for this or whatever. So I don't really think it's an issue. It was me just playing out loud my crazy self-talk.
Thank you for that feedback. It's really been interesting to see the dynamic, having conversations with both of you, Eric at the in-person and then here on the call. It's been great.
It's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Misty. Brian, I've got one final question, and then we'll let you kind of have the floor to wrap if there's any kind of parting words of advice you've got. But mine is, how do you like the COO to say no to you? Like, how do you want them to be able to say, the emperor has no clothes, right? The emperor is naked.
Mhm.
Can you walk us through that? Because it feels like that's a role that the COO needs to play.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, straight up, I just want straight up, like, just tell me what you're thinking. So Cameron and I used to do this thing where it was like, bottom line it, just bottom line. So we learned through some personality profile stuff, I think it was, that Cameron's way of showing up is, okay, Brian, okay, we got this situation and blah, 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 and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Half an hour later, he's like, so what do you think we should do? And I'd say, well, what do you think you should do? And he goes, I think we should do this. Yeah, that makes sense. Great. So what we did is, instead of, I want to hear Cameron talk for half an hour, but give me the context first, bottom line it. So Cameron would, and it worked. We both had to adapt for each other, but Cameron would come in and go, Brian, here's the brief situation. This is what I think we should do. Can I give you some more context? And boom, that would save us half an hour. If I'm like, hey, that's what you think we should do, is makes total sense to me, I'm aligned, go do it. Or do you need to vent? Do you want to share more on it? And Cameron go, yeah, I just need to vent for a second, just to make sure you're 100% on board, or just to get it out. So it allowed me to have better, I was able to listen better as someone who's ADD, like, tell me what I'm listening for. And so same thing with Eric, same thing with all our conversations, is just learning how to better communicate. I don't even remember the question. I'm getting ADD now.
It was about, how do you like the COO to say no to you?
Oh, yeah.
When we have to say, or not now, like, hey, great, the hunks of junks calendar was like the great idea, but it was like not now until, 2 years later when we finally went for it, right?
Yeah, and then still it was probably like, it was a terrible idea, and then we let college hunks take it, and they ran with it. But it's like, I think just saying no in a straight up way, and starting with that bottom line, hey, I've got a concern here, and I think that this idea is maybe not right now. I mean, what Eric and I do, because again, it's so straight up with two of us, is he's like, I believe this could be a good idea, but there's no way we can put this on our plate right now. Can we relook at it? Can we make a note and come back to it in 6 months? Great. Or I might say, well, hold on here. You don't think it's one of our biggest opportunities right now. Let's talk through this, because here's why I think it is. And then we talk through it. He's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that perspective. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, great. Let's find someone. Let's go make this happen. So it's like anything. It's communication. I mean, how many times have I said, it's like a marriage, right? It's just like our spouses in real life, and things can be tough. It's figuring out how to communicate with each other. Cameron and I mean, Cameron would send me, he'd be like sitting right on the other side of the room, and he'd send me an email, and I'd reply back because I was busy. And I would say, no problem. And then he'd come over and he goes, why are you upset? I go, upset about what? You're like, you just said no problem. And I'm like, yeah, because it's not a problem. It's like, but you sound frustrated. I'm like, dude, I typed that in a 2-word email back to you. How could you possibly sense? He goes, okay, well, just checking, just checking. So communication is hard and it takes work and it's getting on the same page. And I don't think you can spend enough, my maybe closing thought, I don't think you can spend enough time as a CEO, COO partnership. And I don't mean that there's necessarily equity shared. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but the partnership of the two, the CEO and COO working together and believing in each other and talking constantly. You can't spend too much time talking. It's really, really, really important. It's your number one team.
Awesome. Well, Brian, if everybody wants to go off mute, Brian, I know that we always like to finish everything 5 minutes early so we can show up on time. We told you to block your calendar for 50 minutes. We're done at 45. Thank you so much for sharing with the CO Alliance. Super appreciative.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, if anyone has a question that didn't get answered, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, all that kind of social stuff. And, send me a note. Happy to try and answer the question when the time comes, and stay in touch.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Enjoy turkey.
Thank you.